Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that the one thing defining who you are is gone forever. For an athlete, it's the worst nightmare. A single second, a sharp snap, and a doctor saying 3 words, never again. But what happens when your body betrays you? How do you rebuild your entire identity from scratch? Today, we are diving into a powerful story called The Body's Betrayal. We're going to follow the emotional journey of someone losing their dream, hitting rock bottom, and finding a new starting line. As we go through this journey, we are going to learn real-life English vocabulary for dealing with hardship, expressing frustration, and talking about personal growth. If you want to master deep, emotional English conversations while exploring a powerful human story, you are in the right place. Grab a notebook, listen closely to the expressions, and let's jump right in to Chapter 1, The Sound of the Snap. The stadium lights were blinding. Marcus could feel the deep rumble of the crowd vibrating through the soles of his shoes. This was the championship game. It was the exact moment he had trained for his entire life. Every single early morning run and every grueling workout led to this night. He was the star forward. The team depended entirely on his speed. The scoreboard showed only 10 seconds remaining in the final match. The score was tied. The ball came loose near the midfield line. Marcus reacted instantly. He bolted forward like a lightning bolt. His heart pounded wildly against his ribs. He easily bypassed the first defender with a quick, decisive cut. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar. The goal was wide open right in front of him. He planted his left foot firmly into the grass to take the winning shot. Then the universe completely shattered. It was not a sound he heard with his ears. It was a sickening, loud snap that echoed directly inside his own skull. His left knee buckled violently inward. An agonizing flash of white-hot pain instantly blinded him. Marcus collapsed heavily onto the turf. The ball rolled away uselessly into the distance. He clutched his leg as cold sweat broke across his forehead. The roaring stadium suddenly went dead silent. He tried to stand up, but his leg felt like liquid. The team trainers rushed frantically onto the field. Marcus looked up at the bright lights overhead. The sharp smell of cut grass filled the air. He felt a deep, terrifying wave of panic wash over him. In that single, quiet moment, he knew everything had changed forever. The smell of rubbing alcohol was overwhelming. Marcus stared blankly at the white ceiling tiles of the hospital room. The steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. His left leg was elevated and wrapped in heavy bandages. It looked completely alien to him. The door clicked open softly. Dr. Evans walked in, holding a thick plastic folder. The doctor did not smile. He sat down on a small stool next to the bed. Marcus felt his stomach tighten into a hard knot. "Marcus, we have the results from the final scan," the doctor began quietly. He opened the folder and pointed to a dark image. "The damage to your knee joint is extensive and complex." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat feeling completely dry. "When can I start physical therapy? I need to be ready for the autumn season trials." Dr. Evans sighed deeply and looked Marcus straight in the eyes. "You don't understand, Marcus. The tissue is completely destroyed. We can perform surgery to help you walk without a limp, but you cannot return to competitive sports ever again. The joint simply cannot sustain that type of impact." The words hung heavily in the sterile air. "Never?" Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. "There must be a mistake. I am the fastest runner on the team."
We can try a different specialist or a new treatment." Dr. Evans placed a gentle hand on Marcus's trembling shoulder. "I am so sorry, Marcus. This is a permanent condition. Your career as an athlete is over." Marcus turned his head away toward the dark window. The cold truth finally settled deep into his chest.
The apartment was completely suffocating. Marcus sat on the edge of his bed in total silence. The crutches rested awkwardly against the wall beside him. Every single corner of the room held a ghost from his past. Shiny gold trophies lined the top shelf of his bookshelf. His favorite running shoes sat right by the front door. They were still covered in dried mud from his last practice. He could not bring himself to move them away. He stood up slowly, balancing carefully on his one good leg. He limped into the bathroom and gripped the edges of the sink. He looked directly into the mirror. The person staring back looked entirely hollow. His shoulders were slumped and his face was pale. For 15 years his reflection had shown a proud athlete. Now he just saw a stranger with broken knees. "Who are you?" he muttered quietly to the empty room. Without sports, he did not know his own name. He was no longer the star player or the fastest runner. He was just a guy stuck in a quiet apartment. The morning sun began to stream through the window blinds. Usually, this was the exact time he went out for his daily run. His body automatically tensed, wanting to move forward. Then a sharp ache in his knee reminded him of the truth. He closed his eyes tightly to block out the light. The silence in the room was louder than the stadium crowd. He felt entirely disconnected from the rest of the world. He crawled back into bed and pulled the blankets over his head. He wanted to disappear into the dark.
The phone on the nightstand buzzed continuously. Marcus stared at the screen without moving a finger. It was a text message from his teammate, Sarah. "Practice went well today. We miss you out here, man." Marcus locked the phone and tossed it onto the sofa. In the beginning, the messages arrived every single hour. His friends brought over hot meals and sat by his bed. They talked about the game and joked about the coach. But as the weeks passed, the texts became less frequent. The team had a new schedule and a new starting forward. They were busy preparing for the regional tournament next month. Their lives were moving forward at a lightning-fast pace. Marcus, however, was stuck in a completely frozen world. One afternoon, he decided to walk down to the local park. He sat on a wooden bench near the paved running path. He watched a group of joggers breeze effortlessly past him. Their breathing was rhythmic, and their strides were perfectly smooth. He felt a sudden, sharp sting of bitter jealousy in his chest. He used to be the person setting the fast pace. Now, he was just an anonymous spectator sitting on a bench. A former teammate, David, spotted him from across the grass. He waved quickly but did not run over to talk. He just kept moving along with the rest of the pack. It wasn't malice. They simply inhabited completely different worlds now. Marcus gripped his wooden crutches tightly until his knuckles turned white. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. The athletic world was moving on without him. He was being left behind in the dust.
The clock on the wall showed 3 in the morning. Marcus could not sleep because his mind was racing wildly. He stared at his running shoes by the front door. A sudden wave of stubborn anger washed over his body. "The doctors are wrong," he whispered fiercely to himself. "They don't know how hard I can actually fight." He stood up quickly, ignoring the dull ache in his joint. He refused to use the wooden crutches this time. He walked unsteadily out into the cool night air. The street was completely empty and silent under the lamps. Marcus took a deep breath, filling his lungs with air. He leaned forward and tried to force his body to jog. He took exactly 2 fast strides into the dark street. Then a blinding spear of agony shot straight up his thigh. His ruined knee gave out completely beneath his weight. He crashed heavily onto the cold, hard asphalt. The rough pavement scraped the palms of his hands raw. He lay there in the middle of the empty street. He tried to push himself up, but his legs shook violently. Tears of pure frustration finally spilled down his cheeks. He beat his fists against the ground in absolute despair. His body was a broken machine that refused to obey. The illusion of a miraculous recovery was entirely shattered. There was no secret comeback story waiting for him. He was completely helpless, sitting alone in the dark street. He crawled slowly back toward the sidewalk on his hands. He had finally hit the absolute rock bottom of his life.
The doorbell rang loudly, shattering the morning silence. Marcus groaned and pulled the pillow over his head. The ringing did not stop. Eventually, his older sister, Clara, unlocked the door herself. She marched into his dark living room and pulled open the blinds. "Get up, Marcus," she said firmly. "You are leaving this apartment today." Marcus glared at her, but Clara refused to back down. An hour later, Marcus was sitting in a bright room at the local community center. Clara had practically dragged him there against his will. She had signed him up for an introductory photography class. Marcus looked around the room with deep hesitation. There were no trophies here. There were no athletic fields. Instead, a dozen strangers sat at long tables holding heavy black cameras. The instructor handed Marcus an older digital camera. It felt strange and awkward in his palms. For his entire life, his hands had only held sports gear. He felt completely out of his comfort zone. He used to be a champion, but here he was just a clueless beginner. "Today we learn to see the world through a different lens," the instructor said. Marcus stared at the small glass circle. He did not want to see a new world. He wanted his old world back. When the instructor told everyone to take their first practice photo, Marcus hesitated. His finger hovered nervously over the shutter button. He felt entirely exposed and ridiculous. But as he looked through the viewfinder, the blurry room suddenly snapped into sharp focus. For the first time in months, his mind stopped racing. He took a deep breath and finally pressed the button. The camera felt less awkward in Marcus's hands now. He sat on a bench at a local skateboard park. His assignment was to capture high-speed movement. At first, he kept missing the right moments entirely. The skateboarders flew past, leaving only blurry streaks. He felt a familiar surge of frustration rising up. Then he paused and took a deep breath. He realized he was approaching this completely wrong. He was trying to react to the motion instead of anticipating it. "Wait a minute," Marcus muttered softly to himself. He knew exactly how athletes moved before they jumped. He understood the subtle shift of body weight and balance. He focused intensely on a teenager wearing a red cap. He watched the boy bend his knees to prepare for a difficult trick. Marcus didn't wait for the jump to happen. His athletic instinct told him exactly when the peak moment would occur. His finger clicked the shutter button a fraction of a second early. He immediately looked down at the small digital screen. The image was absolutely perfect and crystal clear. The skateboarder was frozen in midair against the blue sky. Marcus felt a sudden electric spark jump in his chest. It was the exact same rush he felt when scoring a goal. The discipline and focus of an athlete were still inside him. He had not lost his internal drive at all. He had simply changed the tool he used to express it. His body had failed him, but his mind was still completely sharp. He smiled genuinely for the first time in months. He had finally found his rhythm again. The local sports editor called Marcus early on Friday morning. He needed a freelance photographer for the big championship match. It was the exact tournament Marcus's former team was playing in. Marcus hesitated for a long time, holding the phone tightly. Going back to that stadium felt incredibly terrifying. Ultimately, he packed his camera bag and drove down to the fields. The familiar roar of the stadium crowd hit him the moment he arrived. The bright stadium lights shone down on the perfectly green grass. Marcus walked out onto the sidelines, his chest tightening with anxiety. He saw his old teammates warming up near the midfield line. They looked strong, fast, and completely full of life. A sharp wave of nostalgic sadness washed over him. He belonged out there on the field, not behind a white line. He raised his heavy camera, his hands shaking slightly. The referee blew the whistle and the intense match began. Marcus forced himself to focus entirely on his new job. He tracked the players through his long glass lens. Suddenly, David broke past the defense and scored a brilliant goal. The entire stadium erupted into a deafening cheer. Marcus automatically pressed the shutter button 3 times. He looked at the digital screen and saw a spectacular photo. David was celebrating with his arms thrown wide open. Marcus felt a strange, bittersweet emotion settle in his heart. He was no longer envious of his old friends. He was genuinely proud of them, but he was different now. He was a storyteller, capturing a beautiful moment. He had successfully faced his past without breaking down. He belonged in this stadium, just in a completely new way. Marcus sat on a blue yoga mat in his living room. The morning sun cast long, warm shadows across the wooden floor. He slowly extended his left leg straight out in front of him. He felt a familiar stiffness in his knee joint. In the past, this physical limitation would have made him furious. He would have cursed his body for failing him so completely. But today, Marcus just closed his eyes and breathed deeply. He leaned forward gently until he felt a mild stretch. He was no longer trying to force a miraculous recovery. He was learning to accept his body exactly as it was. His physical therapist had taught him that healing required patience. It was a slow, quiet process, completely different from sports training. "You are doing great," he whispered softly to himself. He massaged the neat, faded surgical scar on his skin. That scar was no longer a symbol of a tragic defeat. Instead, it was proof of his survival and his resilience. His body had changed, but it was still an amazing vessel. It carried him to new places and allowed him to see the world. He spent an hour doing gentle, low-impact movements. He focused entirely on balance, mindfulness, and flexibility. There were no cheering crowds or gold medals waiting for him here. The only reward was a deep sense of internal peace. He stood up slowly without using the furniture for support. His knee felt stable, strong, and completely pain-free. He had finally stopped fighting against his own flesh and bone. He had forgiven his body for its betrayal. They were finally on the exact same team again.
The morning air was crisp and clear. Marcus stood at the starting line of a local community marathon. He was not wearing running shorts or a plastic race number. Instead, two heavy professional cameras hung securely from his shoulders. The editor of the city newspaper had hired him for the event. Marcus looked down the long asphalt road stretching before him. A year ago, standing here would have broken his heart completely. Now, he only felt a profound sense of excitement and purpose. The race coordinator raised the starter pistol into the air. A loud dang echoed down the street, and the runners lunged forward. Marcus did not feel a single sting of envy or regret. He moved quickly along the sidewalk, positioning himself perfectly. He dropped to one knee to get a dramatic, low-angled perspective. He watched the sea of determined faces rushing toward his lens. His finger clicked the shutter rapidly, capturing the raw human emotion. He saw the intense discipline and the fierce drive in their eyes. It was the exact same spirit that used to define his own life. He realized that the athlete inside him had never actually died. The accident had not destroyed his passion, his focus, or his grit. It had simply forced those qualities to find a brand new home. He was still a competitor, fighting to capture the perfect story. The lead runners sprinted past him, their sneakers slapping the ground. Marcus stood up proudly and adjusted the strap on his camera bag. He turned toward the finish line with a genuine smile. He was no longer running away from his painful past. He was stepping forward into a beautiful, bright future. This was his new starting line, and he was ready. Marcus's journey shows us that a devastating loss doesn't mean the end of your story. It just means the beginning of a new chapter. He didn't lose his discipline, his focus, or his passion. He just found a new home for them. When life forces you to pivot, the strength you built in your past always comes with you. Now, let's look at 3 powerful expressions we encountered in today's story that you can use to talk about real-life challenges. To hit rock bottom. This means to reach the lowest possible point in your life, just like Marcus did in Chapter 5. Out of one's comfort zone. To be in a situation that is unfamiliar and challenging, like Marcus in his first photography class. Bittersweet. An emotion that is a mixture of sadness and happiness, which Marcus felt watching his old team play. In the comments below, write a sentence using one of these 3 expressions. Tell me about a time you had to step out of your comfort zone, or a time you faced a difficult choice. And you can find all the vocabulary of the story down below in the description box. If this story inspired you and helped you practice your English today, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We have more stories left in our journey, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Keep listening, keep practicing, and I will see you in the next story. Goodbye.